Hi there everybody, this is going to be a tutorial on how to complete our first value note catcher for this unit. So we've already written down the definition. We've got this value scale here that is going to guide us through how to create all of these value scales using different techniques. So the first one is going to be shading. So the way that we are going to be doing this is with a pencil, and I'm going to start by creating my lightest and my darkest values. My lightest value is always just going to be white, and then for this darkest value, you can see up here, it's going to be black. So I'm going to make this as dark as possible. And that is as dark as I can make that. So now that I have my lightest value and I have my darkest value, I am going to work inwards. So I'm going to make my second lightest value right here, and I'm going to be, actually that might have been too dark. I don't know yet, but I think I need to add a little bit here. So I'm going to make this as light as I possibly can. And that just means barely touching the paper with your pencil. And then I'm going to go to my next darkest value. I'm going to add a little bit more intensity, not too much, but just enough that it's different from this value. Trying to color in the lines. And as we go, if you are noticing that things look a little bit wrong, it's all okay because we can always go back and erase some things. I'm going to go to my next value right here before reaching the middle, and I'm going to draw a little bit more intensely. And then I'm going to go to my middle value. I'm noticing already that this one is going to need to be lighter. And I can just use an eraser, which are at your tables, to kind of lighten that up a little bit. There we go. I'm going to lighten this one as well. You can do these modifications as you go. This is a tricky process. There we go. Okay. I'm going to add some of that value back in at the top here. Okay. Now I'm going to go to my middle value, and I'm going to add just enough pressure that I feel like this is right in between my lightest and my darkest value. Okay. Now I'm going to work from the right to the left, working inward to make these values that are darker. So I'm going to go as intense as I possibly can without making it totally black right here. I would say that's pretty good. Could use a little bit more. Great. Now I'm going to go to my next value right here, drawing a little less intensely, but still keeping it pretty dark. And this is all about that pressure you're applying with your pencil, so play around with that. Be aware. Okay. And then I am going to go to the value that is right before my middle ground value. This part is the trickiest because over here it was easy. We didn't have any values drawn. And over here it was easy. We didn't have any values drawn. But as you work towards the middle, you have to adjust things so that it actually looks like a gradient. I would say this is honestly looking pretty good. My lightest value is definitely as light as I want it to be. I don't know why I added that extra little bit. I think that's totally fine. It's a little tricky to see on the overhead camera, but you get the idea. I'm going from white all the way to black. This is looking pretty good. I might add a little bit more darkness to this value, a little bit more darkness to this value, just to distinguish these as much as I can. I feel like these two right here are always the hardest. But that looks pretty good. So we are going to be working this way for the entire activity. We are going to be working lightest, darkest, and then in the middle, okay? Towards the middle. All right, so cross-hatching is the next one. So for my lightest cross-hatching value, I am going to do the following. And cross-hatching is simply adding lines that overlap each other, kind of like a checkerboard, okay? So for cross-hatching this one, I am going to add maybe that many lines, okay? And the distance between these lines, the space between these lines, is what determines how light or dark we're going. So that's my lightest value. My darkest value is going to look like this. I'm using the same pressure on my pencil, and I'm just adding a ton of lines. And that's all that cross-hatching is. You're not adding lighter lines or darker lines. You're just adding lines that go back and forth like that. Okay? So I'm going to go back to the start again, and I'm going to add a few more lines. You could probably make this mathematical if you wanted to. So that's my second cross-hatching value. I think that's going to be good, but I can always go back later if I feel like that's not right. There's my third one. Here's my fourth one. Here's my middle value. Okay, you can see how our eyes perceive this as going light to dark. And you'll also notice that because I'm a lefty, I am smudging my paper like crazy. Okay. Now I'm going to work from the outside in again. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to add enough lines that it's just slightly lighter than my darkest value. It just means we can see a little bit more white space there. Okay, and then I'm going to hop over here, go a little bit lighter, but still pretty intense. These kind of look similar. I might add a few more to this one and a few more to this one just to really show, okay, this is the darkest one, this is the second darkest one. Again, you get a feel for these things. Oh my gosh, my hand is really smudging things. Okay, and then I'm going to go to this, again, what I think is the trickiest one right here, and try to match these together with one that is slightly darker than the middle one, but slightly lighter than the one to the right. I think I did it. I think that's pretty good. Yeah. So again, the strategy here is how can we use less lines so there's more white space over on the left, And how can we reduce that white space by adding more lines on the right? That's all that you're doing here. I should make these lines a little bit darker so you can really understand. I'm not trying to make my lines themselves darker or lighter. My hand smudged these a little bit, so that kind of changes it. But all I'm doing is adding more lines or less lines. In part 2, we're going to be flipping this over and doing the next side.